That isn't impacted.
Do you want me to do a private thing?
No, because this is working.
Oh.
It's working. Can you open things?
Yep, I can.
That would be me.
She came in quickly. The 5G is working well. A password for that should be. Oh, I've been saved. Okay. Hey, that did it. I will call to order this regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Trustees. Trustee Darfler is excused. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No,
I feel like I do. Okay. There are no changes to the agenda. We will move on to our consent agenda. Item number 3, we have abstract of claims. Straggler from 24-25, as well as our first abstract of 25-26. And meeting minutes, meeting minutes from our 2 May meetings, May 12th and 29th. The 24-25, I guess it's not really a straggler, it's only June 10th. Abstract 13 of the 24-25 fiscal year. We have general fund expenditures in the amount of $196,396.45. Water fund abstract totaling $17,341.39. Sewer fund totaling $11,499.27. And then for our first abstract of the new fiscal year, we have general fund abstract totaling $98,753.09 and a sewer fund abstract totaling $9,768.05. And so I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
second,
Any comments, questions, or needs to pull anything from the consent agenda? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
oh, geez.
Any opposed?
Get out of there.
Next item we have is our first public comment period. Sunlight is, isn't it? Pretty intense. And so if any member of the public would like to make a comment on anything, please feel free.
Isn't if you use the microphone, it gets in our recording.
You don't have to stand if you don't want to, but the mic will help anyone who watches this online. Either now or later.
Okay. Well, I sent, I knew that, there was a place to send comments just around the, flood, the storm watch. So I just wanted to just come here and just read what that was. So if you don't mind, if I can just read it just out loud, just so you have it, and just
Sure.
kind of be on record, I guess. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the matter. We live on 212 Pennsylvania Avenue, right downtown. And there's just a growing concern of the flooding. And I know that there's been a lot of rain, right? That is unusual also, but the way that it's collecting is really what I want to emphasize. We have flooded twice. The culvert has flooded, overflown into our home twice, once in May and once last night. So I'm not remembering someone's name, so I'm laughing because I'm tired. But on both occasions, the water overflowed from the culvert. And it flooded across our front lawn and moved into our home. And so the flooding really, I think the culvert is moving, but the capacity of the water that's going there is just, it's a lot more than it has. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. I know that this summer, the front water basin cover is in the front of our property, and it was damaged earlier this summer, and the damage occurred when we saw dump trucks and semis kind of turning left onto Pennsylvania Avenue in front of our home. And they just repeatedly drove over the cover, and the cover actually pushed toward our home from the culvert. And it was dislodged and exposed the water basin below. And the cap was repaired, but there is kind of an underlying concern that we have that it's impacting the culvert potentially in some way, the way that it has pushed the basin over into the culvert, eliminating kind of the space in the front of our home. And so that just remains a concern that I just wanted to share with all of you. We haven't had flooding since we moved in May 2014. We do have a lot of proactive steps to manage the water flow and prevent flooding. That includes a drain in front of our lower level door, a sub pump that runs underground into that back room, so it eliminates the water, and 2 French drains in the front yard. And these systems have protected our home for over a decade. We have never had flooding in our home. So the May 15th incident, you know, we had about a 1 to 2 feet of standing water in front of our door. I know that many people did across the community as well. I think we were fortunate to have the fire department help us with that scenario. And but the flooding was, you know, really just coming from the culvert that was damaged, maybe somewhere along the line on Pennsylvania Avenue, impacting all of our neighbors. So I just would respectfully request that it be investigated for the functionality of it, with, you know, into the future, and potentially that basin in front of our home, if that is impacting the culvert as well. So I just wanted to say, on behalf of my side and our neighbors on our side, help, that'd be great.
And Sarah, I was yesterday and today, but I think maybe an email came with pictures. Okay, so
Pictures, yeah.
so I again just came back about TV, so I'll make sure that the engineers and the board get that.
Yeah, just so you're aware, there's obviously been a lot of concern over this in the last few weeks. We have our engineering firm revisiting the 2022 stormwater management plan, which highlights spots in the village where it's particularly problematic. So all these pictures are helpful because it will go to them. And then they'll be coming down and doing some on-site visits. Dusty can check that culvert sooner, but then the engineers can also look at it as well to see if there is any damage. And then we'll go from there. Other public comment? Scott, if you can hear me, if you want to make a general public comment, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we will be moving on to other topics. Actually, You have the raise hand feature available, Scott. If you do, and you want to comment, feel free to use it. Otherwise, we'll have another public comment period at the end. All right. Give me 1 second, Scott.
Okay, that's
All
all.
right.
I was trying desperately to unmute myself. I'm unfortunately in a hotel room out of this the village. Um, you and I have corresponded obviously about our unique situation on Larchmont Drive and the fact that, you know, it sounds like construction had altered the drainage of the person who just spoke. A neighbor in our case altered the drainage, which caused unfortunately for us, not incredible damage. I did want to read into the record a thanks to the fire department because they showed incredible initiative in taking care of the situation. I don't know if what they did was above board or not, but they took care of it and said if there was an issue that they, you know, would have to talk to you. So I just want to express again my appreciation that they did what they did when they did it, because otherwise we would have had far more damage. The water in our case was in our crawl space within 6 inches of our insulation from the first floor. And we've never had flooding in our crawl space. And our home has been there for 21 years. So I just wanted to again say thank you to them for their timely resolution. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Scott. And as I've told you via email, stay tuned for updates on the stormwater management plan and what may or may not be available to the village in terms of available action.
Yeah, and I do see on the agenda tonight is a law. I have not read that yet, but I was going to take some time to peruse that as well.
Somewhat unrelated, although it does deal with water, but
It seems to be more toward building permits and making sure that people are doing their due diligence for stormwater management.
it's and we'll get to this in a moment, but it's more has to do with change state regulations with respect to FEMA floodplains and so forth.
Ah, okay. I saw water and got all excited. Thank you, Roden.
You bet. Any other public comment? Hearing none, then we'll move right along to reports from representatives and long time no see in person.
Waiting for the weather to. Let's see, we have two, let's see when I was here last. So I have April and let's see, March. No, I was here in March. So I have April on sales tax. And that was a little bit good news there. The county was up.
You saw it, you don't have to call it again.
Okay, thank you. So April sales tax for the county was up 2.33% from last year, and year to date, we are up 7.4% from 2024 at this time. For the municipalities on average, it's up for April 0.86 and year to date up 4.79%. And we did a resolution at the county to reaffirm that we want to do a center of government. It's something we've been talking about pretty much the whole time I've been there, which is almost 8 years, and other legislators report they've been talking about it for 20 years. So, you know, sometimes not here, but sometimes government works takes a long time to do things. So we had a resolution where we reaffirmed that we want to do that. We have hired Holt Architect. And so in that vein, before we get too far along, we are doing, let's see. We are reaching out to folks around the county to see if they have any input on it before we've drawn up any plans or anything. So we're gonna do like 2 or 3 levels of reaching out to people and getting feedback. So we're not doing them in every municipality, but we're trying to do it in every kind of region. So the one closest to here would be Enfield, and that's at the Enfield Community Center, 162 Enfield Main Road. That's June 12th, 6 to 7:30. And so we have another one in Groton, Dryden, Caroline. And then we're gonna have, after those are done, on June 24th, we're gonna have one at 6 o'clock at the Legislature Chamber, which is 121 East Court Street in Ithaca. And that's also gonna be a hybrid. The other ones are in person, but this one's in hybrid so that anybody could zoom in. And try to have that would be more accessible for folks. So that's our first round. And also along with that, I have postcards that I brought. I'll split them up between you. If you guys want some for the office, so if you go to things in the community, I can try to pass them out. I didn't have the time for Porch Fest. That was a nice day, could have passed out a bunch then. But so this is a short, this is our preliminary survey. We don't have any plans yet, as I said, and there's 2 different QR codes, and it explains what they are. One's for the survey, and one is to just learn more about what we have so far. And we have a page on the county website explaining where we are so far. And so I'll give you those.
So I would just point out that the advanced team sent us those images, which is great, so I was able to put
good.
that in the newsletter. Last week, and I'll work on the postcard,
Excellent.
but leave them for sure, we'll put them up,
Okay.
yeah.
So
So
we're trying
thanks to them for sending us advanced information.
Okay, I'll let Monica know. Yeah, so I told her, of course, my district or this district is really good about sending things out to the
Yeah,
constituents, so I really appreciate that. So the residents, I should say. And so we also passed a resolution to override the tax limit, and I know you folks know what that is. We are very concerned this year whether we're going to have to go over the tax limit because of a number of different things, including building a new shelter. And gradually, the state cutting back on some of the reimbursements that they've given us before, so we're not sure what's gonna happen, but. Let's see, and then we're in the midst of hiring updates. We just I don't think the name is announced yet, but we have somebody for home health. Unless you've seen it announced. I don't know if it's gone out yet, but there's a number of approvals that person needs to get, including all the way up to the state. So we have a really good candidate for that. And then Department of Social Services. The Highway Department and our Finance Department are all positions that we're going to be looking for you folks around the next couple of months. Let me just check. I've got lots of papers today. Thank you. I just wanted to mention 2 quick things that talking about flooding, and as you folks know, this is really for more people out in the public, but you know, the flooding is happening. People are having issues all over the county. We're having more rain events, and so this started, you know, a number of years ago. People said, "I never had flooding." I'm hearing that all the time. I used to be a home inspector, and I retired a couple of years ago. And I've been hearing that for like the past 10 years. People saying, "I've lived here for 60 years, never had it flood before." And so unfortunately, rain events are happening like that. So I applaud all your efforts, and I have been hearing lots of great things when I'm running into people. The village helped with this and that, so that my blah 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 was flooded, but they helped. So thank you so much. And I know people are also saying you're asking for instances of where people did flood and all that information, so people just feel really involved, you know, and heard. So thank you for doing that. The last thing I wanna say is, we are updating our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. And I wanted to let folks know that that's coming up for a vote July 15th at our legislature meeting. And why I'm bringing that up, that's our policy for the county for our staff, is because I don't know if that's gonna pass. So if anybody would like to put their 2 cents in to the county or look at our policy, but things are a little different. Some people are, I don't wanna say exactly what my colleagues are thinking, but I would say what they're saying is that they're wondering if we should pull back a little bit on some of the words we use. And I said that my comments were, if we pull back on the words, we pull back on the intent, and it just change what, there's no, you can't really soften the word equity and make that into something else. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents I'm putting out there to the community too. I hope it does pass. Right now, I don't know if we have enough votes, so that's,
Did you say it was an update or just a reaffirmation of the existing policy?
it's an update. It was done, I don't know how many years ago. So it'll be on our agenda, so it won't be out. I can send it to you if you're interested, but it won't be out on our agenda, goes out. Let's see, so that's July 15th, so it doesn't go out till the week before.
You could share it. I would
If
appreciate
you'd
it.
like, me to email you that.
That's doable.
Just, yeah, I think that's about it. Any questions?
Comments or questions for you?
I'm gonna run over because I hear there's.
Got double duty tonight. That's right. Well, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, good to see everybody.
You too.
Thank you.
You let us know if across the street is more or less exciting than our meeting.
I'm expecting less.
We did have.
We'll be more excited.
I know my screen.
We are, the two.
Oh, that's true.
What's going on? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, we have a public hearing scheduled for proposed local law number D2 2025, which is an amendment and replacement of our floodplain regulations. As I mentioned earlier, very briefly, a lot of this is boilerplate that was reviewed by our attorney to replace some of our much older floodplain regulations. The last sentence of the very first paragraph on the first page. Actually, the last half of the last sentence on the first paragraph states that this is to supersede and replace existing Village of Trumansburg local laws, rules, and regulations for floodplains and floodplain permitting. As some folks will recall, FEMA recently updated their floodplain maps. Most of the Village of Trumansburg does not have floodplains, but if there is some tiny section of the village that is in a floodplain and someone wanted to try to get a permit to build there, these laws would govern. And so I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing on proposed local law number D2 of 2025.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? I see one member of the public present online. If he would like to comment on this proposed local law, Scott, now is a good time. Members of the public present in person.
Nothing written submitted.
Nothing has been submitted in writing. Again, just for those keeping track at home or on the recording, this is largely a combination of boilerplate from DEC as well as other municipalities with respect to building code in designated floodplains. Not seeing any hands. And seeing no one else in person. Then I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing on proposed local law D2 of 2025.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? And with that, there's certain time to discuss if necessary, but I would entertain a motion to approve and adopt proposed local law D2 of 2025, an amendment and replacement of village floodplain regulations.
So moved.
Second,
Comments, questions, discussion?
I think one thing to note just for the audience is that floodplains are entirely separate from flooding that's incidental to our infrastructure or rain events. I mean, not rain events broadly, but it's about really focused on the defined floodplain, not, you know, like the Penn Ave example from earlier, which is not impacted at all by this.
Any other comments or questions? None. Then, all in favor of approving and adopting proposed local law D2 of 2025, please say aye.
aye.
Aye. Note that trustee Darfler is not present. And it passes. All right, thank you, everybody. We will need to sign this, which we'll do at the end. Item number 7 then, reports from this board. I have a housekeeping item, which is, we talked some months ago about new Zoll cardiac monitors and the adjacent service contract and agreements. These were submitted to our EMS administrator, Joel Fay. And, we simply did not authorize him to execute these, as normally it would be myself that would execute these. Perfectly fine for a department head to do it, but the board does need to approve it. So I would entertain a motion to authorize EMS Administrator Joel Fay to execute the Zoll cardiac monitor agreement and the Zoll service contract.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second,
Comments or questions? None. Worth a
Stop.
shame. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Just one item from my end. Hopefully folks have seen the press release that came out last week. Formally announcing from New York State Parks the acquisition of the former Camp Barton Boy Scout Camp and the licensing agreement with Three Falls Local Development Corporation, which is an entity made up of the village of Trumansburg, towns of Covert and Ulysses. And also announcing that Three Falls Local Development Corporation received a $100,000 grant from Parks and Trails of New York to do a master plan for the property. So that is something that had closing on the property occurred last fall. And we've been waiting on the formal announcement. So it's nice that that is finally out there. There will be a local press release coming out tomorrow, I believe, from Three Falls jointly with 3 municipalities, reiterating what I just said, explaining that the park is open, but for passive use only. For anyone who's wondering what passive use means, it basically means there's nothing for you to do there. There are no bathrooms to be used. There are no trails to be hiked. There is no water to be swam in. But if you want to drive through and park, if you can find parking that isn't muddy, and walk around in an open field and walk your dog on a leash, because it is a state park, and bird watch, you are fully entitled to. There's lots of planning yet to come. I mentioned the grant for planning. And so this will be, as we'd stated a few years ago, multi-year project to make this newest state park something that is a true attraction, tourist attraction, local public attraction. And to that end, because people have lots of questions, we're going to have a public informational session Tuesday, July 1st 6 p.m. at the Trumansburg Fire Hall. So this is, if anyone, again, within the sound of my voice is hearing this, think of this as a bookend public meeting to the one we held in February of 2022, when this process really began. So 3+ years later, although there's much work yet to be done, this is a bookend to that in terms of having information that we can make available to folks. So that will be advertised on the village website, social media, village newsletter. The town will also be putting out notices of this. So July 1st, which is 3 weeks from tonight, I believe, 3 weeks from tonight, 6 p.m. Fire Hall. I do not think we'll try, but I don't know if we'll be able to live stream that. So if folks are interested, certainly plan on attending. Maybe we will try to get equipment over there.
Will you be taking questions from people that are there?
Yes, this is not a village board meeting. This is the Three Falls LDC.
Right.
And it is a town hall style
Oh, okay.
informational session, which is primarily going to be what I just said. So the rest of the time will be open to the public to ask questions. Fred Bond from Finger Lakes Regional Headquarters of State Parks will be there. And then the Three Falls LDC, which consists of representatives of the 3 municipalities. Lots of time for questions and answers.
If 3 trustees,
There will only be 2 trustees there, in myself and Deputy Mayor Carver will be there for Three Falls.
so it's okay if they're.
If they're in the audience as members of the audience. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not-
Okay.
Not a board meeting. And that's it for me. Marsh, fire.
Oh, okay.
Well, I had a conflict with the meeting, but as you can imagine, there's been quite a buzz with the fire department. And there's only 2 words, water and trees. That's it. So it's been crazy. I think Matt sent an email to all of us saying that he had 24 water calls and the last big deluge that we had, so many people got, as mentioned, flooded out. It is unprecedented. I've never seen this, just like everybody else has never seen it. I mean, there's just places that our family can't even mow, that we've mowed for years, but we can't because there's standing water, so. A lot of tree calls after last night too. And so that's basically been their focus, is the water, and I just have to say, it's just amazing how quickly and how great they are when they respond to people. Our neighbors across the street got absolutely decimated by water, and the fire company was there in a matter of minutes to help pump them out, so. Those are the number one things, and they've just been going crazy with it, with these storm surges. It's kind of nuts.
That's it for fire?
That's it. for
Okay.
now. Nothing other than that going. Good.
Okay, EMS youth and street tree.
I don't have much to report for EMS. Or excuse me, for you, for street tree. I will note quickly that my basement flooded, which I don't think has happened since the flood of 35, like,
Wow.
just does not happen. Which you will
And considering where you.
Probably not there.
I mean, I've had dreams, you know, but no, I was not actually. Didn't live through it, unfortunately. But then I would be a vampire and that'd be fun. Anyway, so EMS, let's start with the calls. 14 in the town of Covert, 1 in the town of Winfield, 4 in Hector, 3 in the village of Interlaken, 4 in the city of Ithaca, 4 in the town of Ithaca, 1 in Lodi, 7 in Mecklenburg, 1 in Newfield, 1 in Ovid, 1 in Romulus, 22 in the village, 32 in Ulysses, or 95 total. I believe last month, if memory serves, was in the low 80s. So we're hovering right around, we'll probably break 1,000 in this calendar year is about where we're trending. We'll see. The question will be, do we get to 1,200 or something like that? That would be exciting, not really in a good way, but that would be noteworthy, we'll say. And I think Joel and I were looking at the numbers for the past few years. And during COVID, things kind of got a little bit weird, right? People didn't call and people did, it was a definite wrinkle in our generally steady upward trend of calls year over year. We're now back on kind of what we had projected pre-COVID. So we're moving along as predicted, which is good and bad in some respects. We are, that's really the only EMS update I have. The one thing I want to call out for all of the many people at home watching live, and hopefully seeing this later, is that our EMS department is hiring. We are really trying to do a hiring push right now. Summer is always hard for staffing, right? People are out on boats and what have you. So if anyone can hear this and is interested, please reach out, either to the front office or to our EMS department or anyone that works there, or to me or to Rorden, and we will make sure you get to the right place. The other piece that's on here is the EMS or the EV charger and the contract. So last month we talked about this briefly. We wanted to get some small updates in the contract language, as well as more details on the charging paradigm. And I'm happy that we did that, because the way that I described it in the last meeting is that we could do dynamic charging pricing. It turns out that is not true. So I had that wrong. I think that must have been an earlier proposal or some different type of software. So in the current proposal, we will have to pick a number. There's pretty good data out there. It's it's a known quality or quantity similar to gas prices, right? So we would still have to do basically what we were talking about last time, which is pick a target. Do we want to be cost neutral? Do we, set a policy goal, and then we would match that. And it would be a little bit higher touch than just set it and forget it, what I was imagining before, but not terribly, right? We would be able to correct on weekly or monthly or however the workflow goes. It's pretty easy to do, but it does mean a human being has to do it, which is an important distinction. So I think the order of operations here is I'd like to approve the contract, and then in subsequent meetings, we'll have to come up with, first of all, the policy choice as far as what do we want our target to be? Do we want to be cost neutral? How does that play out? And then how are we going to do this? Presumably a lot of it will fall on the front office, and I think it'll be a small lift, but there may be other parts as well. So from there, and then procedurally, we will also have training and stuff once we're up and operational, that'll help us all go through this, or anyone who's interested, or anyone who we impress on them that they should be interested. But that's about where we are. I think I'll just start by moving that we authorize Rorden to sign the 2 contracts, and there are updated contracts in your email.
Those are them.
Oh, they are. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So in any case, I move that we authorize Rorden to sign the 2 contracts with Jacomb.
Second,
Second.
comments, questions? This is for the actual installation.
Those are the actual installation. I believe those nice egg. Are those from last month? I believe we authorized.
That's make ready. Yeah. Just gonna sign.
Okay.
There are no other comments or questions. All in favor of authorizing me to sign these contracts for EV installation with Jacomb LLC, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay.
So I will report back as soon as we have a timeline for construction, what that looks like. There will be a lot of coordinating with Dusty and Tom in terms of permitting and then actual process. And I'll make sure everyone's kind of in the loop on that, because they're both very, very public spaces. And so we will all undoubtedly get a lot of questions, in particular in front office. So as soon as I have those details, I will share them. I know they were hoping to have it scheduled a little bit earlier. I think they expected, well, I don't know. But we'll see how it stacks up. I think we're probably going to be kind of at the end of the line for their construction season. So it may not be a couple months, but like I said, I'll let everyone know where we fall in the order.
Do you remember or did you take note of, is it a day installation? And when did it that time? I didn't notice.
So the town's installation is entirely different.
It's so.
That is a very low
Wow.
current. That's basically household service, right? So that's a day an electrician comes and puts in
Oh,
something very,
okay.
very simple.
Okay.
This is much, much more industrial. So this is, there's a transformer that goes in on the ground that supplies these. It's
Okay.
bigger footprint, much bigger in terms of construction, footprint, impact, timeline.
Oh, wait, for this kind of. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, one more detail that I wanted to share, and I don't think I shared last time. We were talking about the demand charges. So one piece I just wanted to let everyone know about is the design of these chargers. There will be two fast chargers. And they, to a limited degree, share power. It will have sort of double the capacity. So if two people are charging at once, it lowers the total speed that they can be charging, which from a user perspective isn't great, right? It means instead of charging at 120, you charge at 60. And I'm making those are guessing numbers, but somewhere in that ballpark. But for our purposes, in terms of our cost profile, it's hugely important that we're not, going up to 240, right, for the demand charges that we were talking about last week. So when, but that's it. That's all I've got.
Okay. Trustee Darfler is excused, as we mentioned, but I will take the opportunity to thank our DPW for all of their efforts when it comes to all things water and storm and trees and so on. Police, Joanna.
Yes. So beginning with the chief's May monthly report, we had 398 calls for service during the month of May, 7 calls for service outside of the village, which included 3 motor vehicle accidents, Gorge Road, 1 business alarm in Jacksonville, domestic on Halseyville Road, and 2 EMS assists. And then from that, we had 133 property checks. 7 of those properties were found to be unsecure. 146 traffic stops and 83 traffic tickets. 8 parking complaints and 33 informational inquiries or background checks for pistol permits. Other than that, the last month has been pretty busy. The chief usually leads the Memorial Day parade, which went well. I felt like it was a little bit longer than last year. Instead of taking 2 minutes, it took 4 minutes. But it was, it went well. And then there was also the most recently Porch Fest, which just from, I haven't looked at the numbers, but it definitely looked like there were a lot more bands, which means that there were a lot more people than there have been in the past, especially since there was last year. Chief Nelson very much appreciated you putting the open container law in the newsletter, which, I get Truman's very friendly. Everybody likes to have a good time, but the roads are still open. People can still drive on the road. Open container when you're walking down the street is not appropriate. And the other thing that Chief Nelson saw was a lot of people were walking the streets, which is great, but you need to understand that there's still cars can pass through all of the streets as well. There is a safety concern when there are large crowds. There were kids without bike helmets on, riding bicycles and on scooters. So we still need to pay attention and be mindful when we are on streets. Even though everybody is trying to have a good time, sometimes you just have that one incident that kind of just brings everything down. Sunday was the half marathon for Ithaca's Gorgeous, which started at the high school. And went down into Ithaca on the Black Diamond Trail. Very successful. Again, a lot of work. The Chief Nelson makes sure that all of the paths are clear for racers. So that took place, and the week before was also the May Day 5K, where they set out, although the streets are open, they still set out barriers for runners so that it does slow down traffic. But people were able to get in and out of their homes safely in their vehicles. So yeah, so that's basically like the kickoff of the police department being out in public. Just because they're out in public doesn't mean that anything's wrong. Some of the officers were asked, what's going on? Is there something wrong? Just because they're out in public, they want to be with other people as well. It does not mean that there's anything wrong, but they do have the safety of our people in mind when they're just walking around. Other than that, I think that's all I had to report. Let me just check one more time.
I do want to say I appreciate the more police presence on our street. It took him exactly 3.5 minutes to pull over a speeder before school the other day when he was there.
Yes, which
And I went over and thanked him very much. And I was just like, you can turn around and back right in because you're still coming.
yeah, so it is a busy time right now, and we did get our annual email from a resident about concerns with the golf course being open. So just a reminder, within the village, where the houses are, it's 25. Near the golf course, it's 30. So if you go past that, you are speeding. So yes. Chief Nelson has been mindful about that. He has sent officers more often in that area. So thanks for the
Sometimes just
reminder.
being seen that is,
Yes,
is important.
yes, thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay, clerk treasurer.
Well, I'm gonna start with the boring stuff first, which is that the HVAC has applied to be a comfort station. It's the fun stuff I was fixing. The HVAC has applied for an application to be a comfort station again in September at the farmer's market. So this will be the third year in a row. Remember that I have written out a lot they do to support AIDS awareness and research. So that's great. And also YMCA pop-up, which will be the third year that they've done that as well at the farmer's market. So just more events and spaces that are already there. It's exciting to be back in what you just said. And then the really, really fun stuff, the tax bills went out the 1st of June. Reminder for everyone that even if you do not receive a tax bill by post, you are still responsible for paying your taxes by June 30th without penalty. It's technically July 1st on the bill. You can see that on the website too if you have any questions. Find an office and get access to your tax bill. I will be putting up some version of a fun fact, since we currently live in a village where there's a lot of turnover in property. about how the county holds your address, and if your property transaction happened at a different time of year, the bill may be in the former owner's name. I'll also work with my colleague to see what we might be able to do to get ahead of that next year. So pay your taxes, they exist, if you own property taxes. The water bills, I will report that the new format went out for the first time, as you recall, in May. Instead of having 12 return postcards, we had 2. So that's a pretty great success, which also, as you recognize, means a lot less work for the front office. So that's a pretty big percentage of calls and whatnot. I don't really have anything else except to note that it's the end of the fiscal year was May 31st. You recognize that because you have an abstract 13 and then an abstract 1. And so our office will be very busy bubbling up all of the expenses and revenues for May, and working in a new cycle with the CPA this year, so that we might be more ahead of the reporting to us. Yep, any questions? Okay.
Okay. Item number 8 is old business. First one is an important one. We, as everyone knows, were awarded almost, I believe, $2.7 million in grant money to install sidewalk on West Main Street from the Farmers Market to Seneca Road, and on Seneca Road from 96 to Compass, as well as on East Covert or East Seneca Road from 96 to the doctor's office. Part of the process for that is that because there's a match portion to the grant and it is a reimbursable grant, we must authorize the village to borrow the full estimated installation cost of the sidewalk. And we will be using this borrowing power, if you want to think of it as a credit line at the bank. We will be using this borrowing power to pay for the project and then getting reimbursed up to the amount of the grant. Unlike a credit line at the bank, however, we're a municipality, which means we need to bond what we borrow, and there's a whole legal process to do that. So before us tonight is a resolution. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It is available for public viewing online and in the clerk's office if anyone's interested. The resolution authorizes, subject to permissive referendum, the Village of Trumansburg to borrow an amount not to exceed $3,320,000 and authorizes the village to issue serial bonds in the name of the village for that amount. There are some publishing requirements. Jess, you'll want to read the letter carefully. And of course, the permissive referendum itself has a 30-day window. And so I would entertain a motion to approve this bond resolution for the West Main Street Sidewalk project. So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions? No. Then in what is an interesting formality that I don't know we've done as a group in a long time, I would ask the clerk to call the roll of the vote on this resolution.
Okay, trustee Horn,
Yay.
trustee Carr, deputy mayor Carver.
Aye.
Mayor Hart,
Aye.
trustee Haynes,
Aye.
and absent trustee Dark.
Very good. And it passes. Thank you, everybody. Next up, under old business, we have a proposed local law for us to review and discuss, and then if we're comfortable with it, to introduce for public viewing and to set a public hearing so that we can potentially adopt it. This local law would be an amendment to our village vehicle and traffic law. The amendment would be to simply change where parking is allowed and or prohibited on Union Street The motor vehicle and traffic law was overhauled, if you want to call it that, in 2019. We've had two amendments since. The first one was to loading zones, and then this one would be to change where parking is permitted. The change would be to allow for parking on the east and or south side of Union Street, depending on your compass, from the intersection of Main Street up to the curb cut along that side of Union Street before the intersection of Cuga Street, and to prohibit parking from effectively the intersection of Congress to the entrance, the rear entrance to the old phone company building. So in terms of language, what it says is the current language in the law says that parking is prohibited on the south side of Union Street. That's the Napa side. The new language would say that parking is prohibited on the west, which could also be considered the north side of Union Street, from the northerly corner of tax parcel 2.5-5, which is that driveway intersection, to the curb line of Congress Street. And so it would be striking the prohibition on the other side of the street. We can always reword this. We can add more detail. The language as done here, will keep it in the same format as the so easy to understand existing law. So any comments or questions?
So in trying to understand the wording, is that what you're describing? So when I read the language of the law, that's what I get out of it.
In terms of allowed parking.
Allowed
Yeah.
parking.
Correct.
All the way to Compass? Or wait, all the way
So
to,
it's just
Just to the end of the building.
this means essentially
the
there's
end of the building.
there's
Yeah.
4, I would say, maybe 5 parking spaces that would be legal on Union Street. One of them being handicapped.
Well, the curb cut behind, so the long yellow line needs to be longer.
But it's in the law, it's just 115 feet.
But in the law, it's striking that whole side of the street. It's removing that language. So this amendment says existing, then new. So the new replaces the existing.
I just have the wrong thing.
Yeah, so section D1 of the existing law has a prohibition on Union Street as written next to existing. We would be replacing D1 with where it says new.
okay.
So the
Oh, I see.
language, the language that exists in the existing law, the new law would not reference
That side.
that side at all. And so therefore there would be no restrictions, except where you have a curb cut, you always have a restriction because it's a driveway.
But okay, so the one that's written for existing is D1,
Correct.
but D2 also pertains to the parking on.
D2 only pertains to the handicap spot, the handicap parking spot. So we're leaving D2 alone so that we have a handicap parking spot
Okay.
at the corner.
Does, okay, okay. I feel like it starts the same though.
It does.
The new one says on the westerly side of Union Street, and so does number 2.
Correct. So you have two, D1 and D2 will be two restricted spots on the westerly side of Union Street.
So then there's no parking on. There's 0 parking on the opposite side.
There's no
Is what you're
restriction.
saying.
There's no restriction on the other side, which means it's all allowed. By removing the language where it says existing. What exists now is so let me start this in a different place. Vehicle and traffic laws do not allow parking. They restrict parking.
Got it. Okay, okay,
The assumption is you're allowed to park
okay,
unless it's prohibited.
okay.
So D1 currently prohibits parking on the Napa side. For a certain
Yes.
stretch.
Yes,
We're removing that completely,
okay,
which means now there would be no prohibition of any kind on the Napa side.
Okay. And only, okay,
And on the phone company side, we would have a prohibition for one spot unless you have a permit. And then a complete prohibition for the second spot up the road.
I can't draw this as fast as Ben Darker can, but I'm trying to draw it so it'll show.
okay, I get it. Okay, okay, so it's writing. Okay. I got it.
And when rereading the existing law, there's actually very few spots that have parking prohibitions.
Mhm.
Trying again, this reflects the new language.
Yes,
That would be parking that is allowed.
correct.
I don't know if you can see that very well.
Okay, yep. Yes, that is what I am understanding.
Now, if there's concern about the Cayuga Street side of the curb cut, then we would need to add language to prohibit parking there. If between all the driveways, there doesn't appear to be a place to park there, then might have an issue at some time, but
I mean, there's a driveway there, right on that.
Right.
So you can't park there.
It is, so I would say that if that becomes a very commonplace thing, it's already a blind turn for us coming out of our driveway because it goes up and then down, so we can't see around it very well as it is. But to me, I'm happy to just see, I'm the only one affected, and I'm very happy to just see how that plays out. I think the concern that we were talking about, the inside of the corner, that to me is the priority. I like it the way it is. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, given the construction, I don't, there used to be a sidewalk, now there's not, I have no idea what's gonna happen. I'm happy to see how it plays out. We can do another update.
Yeah, I think that'll work. Yes.
I think this removes the safety concern.
Mhm.
well, it certainly removes both sides of the road, allowing for parking at the bottleneck.
Right.
Right.
Which I think, Chief Nelson, I wouldn't have characterized that necessarily as a safety concern, but I think it was. He saw it that way. The bottleneck itself, not just the internal or the inside of that curve. So I think this is great compromise, honestly. We'll see how it plays out.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no edits needed then. So we'll consider this draft local law something of 2025. And we'll consider it introduced. And let's hold our public hearing for it at our July meeting, which is scheduled to be the 14th. Is everybody good for July 14th?
Yes.
I believe that's grassroots week, isn't it?
It'll be quiet on this side.
I'll be fine. It's the 14th.
Isn't it 18, 19, 20?
Yeah, I think it's
17. Well, in any event, we have a meeting scheduled. We have a meeting scheduled for the 14th. And so we will notice a public hearing for draft local law, I guess D3.
Yeah.
Trying to take care of that parking. Okay.
I do want to comment that a resident from Cayuga Street came in on Friday to pay a bill and also say, so the street. Or speaking about it. Good job.
Yes, it is a problem.
Mm.
Especially
He
when-
works at that, like twice on 2 occasions.
Yes. Yes, especially when there was like this huge truck that was blocking the entire thing for like 2 days.
The construction vehicles are really kind of a horse of a different color, like
But it's
if that wasn't
still,
happening at the same time, I feel like.
So Tom's excited that this might happen. It will allow them to understand parking exists, even though construction vehicles, I guess, have a little bit way that it's. He was feeling like it might keep them in line.
Construction vehicles do not have more leeway except when it comes to
Until it's-
enforcement.
All right, third item of old business is a board discussion on the request for a zoning change to 14 and 16 Elm. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read, guys, village council's comments, thorough as always. I don't want to certainly make any decisions without trustee Darfler here, because CPZR is always has an eye on these issues. But I do want to get a sense of where the board is at. I don't want to leave a well-constructed, well-thought-out request to the board unanswered, although we have the right to not answer it. We're not under any obligation to answer it. But I think given the structure and content of the request and the presentation from the property owner, that it deserves a response. I just want to get the sense of the board after reading guys' comments about how we might proceed, how we might consider proceeding, if anyone has had any thoughts or leanings about how to proceed. And I will simply add one thing which Guy didn't mention. This is something I would want feedback on from trustee Darfler, but one option that occurs to me, if there's a concern about kind of the open-ended nature of rezoning something as commercial, bearing in mind what Guy noted, which is that the rezoning has to be in the best interest of the village, not just the best interest of a particular property owner. If we feel that it's in the best interest of the village to allow those two parcels adjacent to existing commercial zone to become part of that commercial zone, we could, if we allowed it, which would require a local law to change our zoning in that section, we could task the CPZR, since they are in commercial zone review. We could task them with how site plan is worded for projects in the commercial zone, with an idea of making sure that 50 years from now, not that zoning can't be changed again, but there's at least something in place to attempt to restrict something wild happening in the distant future. And or we could task the CPZR, since they are a committee of this board, with developing some type of a light commercial or mixed use designation for certain areas of the village. Like maybe from the intersection of Main Street up on Elm, is town hall really a commercial use, or is it something quasi in the middle? What does commercial mean? I'm sure this is all the things that CPZR is discussing. But if we wanted some type of we use the phrase mixed use, but if we want something more specifically a lighter commercial district, where certain things are allowed in commercial, but maybe some things that are allowed in commercial aren't allowed in this new lighter use district. There are other areas of the village that could work.
Maybe if we have an underlying thought of just maintaining its original integrity versus it becoming something else. Like
We have to be careful with how tightly we define what can happen there, because then we fall into the spot zoning trap.
Mhm.
But
right,
I'm thinking also about the so-called East Gateway. Is that really any kind of commercial go there? Maybe. And then West Gateway, where we have a very large piece of vacant land. Is it time for,
Could we do something that would be like, it has to fit the character of the village?
I think that's more of a site plan review
site plan review.
piece. The zoning itself, trying to channel Guy here a little bit. The zoning itself is about land use prohibitions.
Mhm.
So once you start getting into character and form, although a lot of communities seem to like form-based zoning. We don't have form-based zoning. We have land use zoning. So what we prohibit is not what we allow. The assumption is it's allowed unless it's prohibited.
Mhm.
So what we prohibit is determined by what we're calling residential or commercial or otherwise. So currently it's residential, which means a lot of things are prohibited. If we want to let if we want to have fewer things prohibited, then we need some type of a different designation. The fact that it abuts a commercial zone makes it a fairly easy decision if we want to make it, to allow that to extend there. And I think in this particular case, that would be okay. I don't personally have a concern about it at this time. But if there's a concern for the future, then I think we're in real danger if we try to attach specific zoning to a particular parcel. But if we were to develop another zoning designation that could easily be applied elsewhere in the village as well, then I think that might be a compromise.
Yeah. I think so too.
So I've never applied for a use variance. My inclination, as I think Ben and I both said over email, is to sort of go with the established channels for something like this, which is a use variance. You guys obviously saying that's difficult, which is fair, but it is kind of like that's the established legal channel that exists within our current paradigm as established. But like, do you know what that looks like in practice? I mean, other than it sort of sucks, it sounds like.
In practice, my understanding is that, and Ben would know this better than I would, but my understanding is that use variances are becoming less and less common at all, because structurally they should almost never be granted. And I think that's Guy's point. I don't think Guy is saying that it's difficult. I think he's saying that if properly adjudicated, the answer should be no. And he has said in other contexts over the last couple of years that use variances are falling by the wayside as an allowed remedy in zoning because of the structural issues with what is required under state law to grant the use variance. But we have the right to, since we are not in any type of a procedure at the moment, we just have a request and we have to decide how to respond. We have the right to say no to the request, in which case a use variance would be the only other option. But I'm also sensitive to, looking for Guy's email, I'm sensitive to not wanting to say no only to force someone into a direction which has legal costs, where the answer should be no. And then are we willing after that to reconsider the initial request?
Right.
That feels odd to me.
But on the other hand, why have this avenue? We're going to actively help people avoid. I mean, that's. I don't know. I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate here or not. I'm pretty undecided, so I don't. I'm not against going one way or the other, but it seems, at least conceptually, to me pretty compelling that would be.
Yeah, I think. So the use variance exists in state law. It's not really us allowing for use variances. A use variance is a function of state law. And the reason why the property owner made this request is because Tom said a use variance should be denied. Guy is now agreeing. And I think the key here is that he's saying, this is Guy's language, is that if standards are properly applied, use variances are difficult, if not impossible, to obtain. So in any event, we could, as I say, this board can say no to the request or just remain silent on the request, and then a use variance would be the only other option available. But
But it would be denied,
It should be denied.
right?
Well,
And I-
it should
and I think-
probably be denied. I mean, we don't. Right, obviously, we should be very dainty about stepping on the BZA's toes for one. But also, I mean, Guy is pretty careful with his language there, right? It's a high bar. That doesn't mean it's impossible.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, acting in the best interest of the village, is it in the best interest of the village to, given the request before us, would the village benefit from that request being considered? And that doesn't mean it has to be granted, but we would at least continue, we would take it to the next level of consideration.
That's what I would like to do. Take it to the next level of consideration, because I thought her presentation was wonderful. I do think it will be a benefit to the community. So. However, we need to move it forward from here. We should try.
I think we should continue to consider it. I mean, I think it would be a benefit to the village to see a business grow. Local business. And maybe think about what it would look like to make those changes that you talked about earlier, about having a more defined what commercial would really mean for this area. What commercial businesses, or having a second definition. I still am concerned about parking. I know, that they have had events, and in talking with the chief, they've had events and they've also issued tickets when those events have happened. So that is still a concern. This would mean that the events would be more often, and perhaps with more people, which would mean more traffic in that area.
I'm happy with moving forward too. I don't have any objection to it. I will just note that this conversation seems to be about either spot zoning or a use variance, right? We're talking about a very specific property for a very specific reason based on a very specific argument, which to me does kind of fly in the face of, right? Like, I hear what you're saying. I'm happy to consider it, but I think we should think carefully about why we're doing this. And if it's because it's best for the village to have sort of these broader plans in place, or because it's best for this singular property.
But it's the only time that somebody would ever come to our board if it were affecting them, so.
Right, but for us, I mean, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, right? But the idea is we can't spot zone, we can't make zoning decisions just for one. And that sounds like the discussion. So I think we should be clear moving forward that we're talking about a broader issue, not the one property. If we're really just considering the one property, I think the only remedy they have in this case, remedies, that's a legal word that I don't need to use, but is a use variance. But again, happy to move it forward. I think we should just be very careful about it.
Throw caution to the wind to do that. I mean, because it's giving them a variance for a very specific reason, which is all this whole discussion.
So we have to be very,
I'm just weighing the,
this is
My
where,
thoughts.
this is why attorneys get to charge what they charge.
out.
We have a request before us, which we have a right to respond or not respond to. The response, if we choose to respond, is a legislative one, which means we can talk as much or as specifically about the request that's being made to us as we want. Spot zoning is its own definition. Spot zoning specifically is saying we want certain rules to be created and applied to one property.
Right.
So that's where I think that we can maybe thread the needle between those two conversations. By in this case, potentially approving the request, which is not spot zoning, we're just absorbing two properties into an existing adjacent zone. We're not doing anything special or different for this property. We're moving a zoning map line. So that's not spot zoning by definition. If the adjacent zone, commercial zone didn't exist, and we said these two properties become commercial, then you can make the argument it's spot zoning. But because there's a commercial zone adjacent, and we simply move the line of the map from here to here, that is by definition not spot zoning. We're absorbing, we're not absorbing anything. We're moving a line between residential and commercial from one location to another. And so that's what we would be doing if we approve the request. The next step, if we take the next step, to ask CPZR to look into other light commercial or hybrid type zoning, we would have to be very careful we're not applying it to a property. We would have to make that definition broad enough so that it can be applied elsewhere in the village. To again, avoid that spot zoning piece.
So I mean, I think thinking about those two things as divergent plans, right? It could be the same, they could overlap, or they could just be separate. Right, we could pursue the CPZR doing an updated, that sort of middle ground thing, which I think is sort of an attractive idea on its own, separate from this property. Or we could do extend the line, or we could do both. But I think, so you may be right, I'm not a lawyer. To me, maybe this doesn't meet the semantic, legal, textual definition of spot zoning. It is 100% like this in terms of the spirit. Clearly the same. I would be more than happy to move forward with sort of talking with CPZR. Although, I mean, you started this by saying I think Ben Darker should be here for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's really his thing. So I would agree with that. I guess it's enough to just say I'm skeptical of the plan on its own, because to me it does have that. It feels like spot zoning for a specific property, as setting aside that, textual definition. But suffice it to say, happy to move forward. Certainly happy to talk more about it with Ben.
So then Ben will be back next week, so I'll probably have a conversation with him after he's unjet lagged himself.
Which might be sometime.
Which could be a bit, just to kind of bring him up to speed on, what we talked about tonight. And then see what his comments are on Guy's. I mean, sometimes Guy presents both sides of an issue. Sometimes he's very, very clear. And to me, this is one of the times where he's more clear. So I want to be sensitive to someone who sometimes we want to be told what to do and he won't. Other times he says this is kind of the way it is. So that does something for me in terms of how I interpret how to proceed. I'll be curious to see what Ben says about that as well. And then we'll plan on discussing it again in July. I will respond to the requester with an update in terms of our intended timeline of discussion without any indication of how we might or might not move forward. And then we can go from there. If anyone has other thoughts come to mind or other suggestions or other sense of how to proceed, certainly let me know. Any other items of old business? Any items of new business? We would normally have a second meeting on the 23rd. Do we have need of a second meeting on the 23rd? Okay, then let us notice the cancellation of our meeting on the 23rd. Second public comment period. I don't see any members of the public present in person or online. I do have a brief, hopefully, I think, brief executive session item. So if there's no other business for the evening, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matter.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?